Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode number 155 of the Backlot 605 podcast. I'm one of your hosts. I am Casey Kelderman. Join with me today as we are ending Dracula month here in the week of Halloween weekend coming up are my co-hosts Brian Mensing and Sam Lenz.
We're a very colorful bunch today.
We are a colorful bunch. We look like the Wiggles on this show, and I don't know how I feel about that.
I feel great about that. The Wiggles are awesome.
I'm glad my kids are too young. Weirdly enough to say it, kids are too young to have known who the Wiggles are.
The Wiggles.
They went straight into Paw Patrol.
Groups. They're the Beatles of children's pop groups. I love them.
Actually, that is very accurate, Sam. I'm going to ask our guest that exact same question. Shelby Hagerdon, are the Wiggles the Beatles of children's musical groups?
I mean, I can't disagree. I mean, there was a lot of, the theatrics. I mean, you do have to say, I mean, I would agree, I think it's good. I think it's a good theory.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or like 4-year-olds chasing their limo down the street, Wiggle Mania. Yeah.
I want to know how this went into a Wiggles podcast.
Starting next week.
It's always been a Wiggles podcast.
We'll be launching a brand new show. It's called The Wiggles Unofficial Podcast, coming up on Backlot 605. Can't wait to do that. That should be a lot of fun. There'll be a lot of hand gestures on that show, I'm sure. Anyway, let's not talk about the Wiggles anymore. Let's get into today's topic as Brian just quits the show. As soon as Wiggles, he can handle anything else we bring up on the show, but Wiggles, that was the straw.
And I've been through sleepaway camp.
You have. Somehow we have brought up Wiggles and Sleepaway Camp, and we're 2 minutes into this episode. This is going great. Anyway, before we get into this week's show, I'm going to have Shelby do a little introduction for herself. Shelby, who are you? What do you do? And what is your history with this movie that we're going to be talking about today, which is 1992's Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula?
Yeah. Hello, I am Shelby Hagerdon. I'm currently an MFA student in screenwriting at Emerson College in Boston, and right now I'm working for a marketing agency. So that's my background. I really like Francis Ford Coppola. His daughter Sofia Coppola is my favorite filmmaker, actually. She makes really great stuff. But no, Dracula is really interesting, and especially this adaptation. Got the book already in hand. I already showed the boys. Mm-hmm. So, I'm really excited to talk about it, though.
Yeah, I think this, obviously, for one reason, we started this series off going in chronological order in a way, doing the series from, Lugosi to Lee to the 79 version to now 1992's. But in my opinion, I think in a lot of people's opinions as well, this might be the most definitive version of this story of Dracula. May not be the most iconic. Obviously, Bela Lugosi, I think, is kind of the unequivocal, like, that's Dracula. That's what Dracula looks like. He's mimicked even Mr. Adam Sandler for better or for worse. That's the voice Adam Sandler is doing. He's not doing a Gary Oldman. He's doing a Bela Lugosi. So I want to go through a little bit of everybody's history with this movie of Bram Stoker's Dracula, Francis Ford Coppola's adaptation of this. I'm going to throw it off to Brian because you probably have the deepest history personally with this adaptation of Dracula.
I think you're just saying longest because I'm the oldest.
I didn't say
that's what he's saying, Brian.
That's exactly what he's saying. It is one of those movies since it's when you're talking 92, I'm 14 years old. In terms of a Dracula movie, horror movie, and some of the context of within this movie, for a 14-year-old, it's a little dirty. Kind of sort of thing, So it's one of those things that intrigued me of like, oh, I'm going to try to read this book. And I remember being a freshman in high school, Lincoln High School, trying to read this book when I realized it's not written like a conventional book. It's a very hard book to read, which explains why Shelby's book looks like it does, because it has basically cliff notes to every single paragraph, so you can actually understand.
Handy.
I want that.
That's cool.
I want that book just because then maybe I could actually understand that, because again, the book is written in letter form throughout the entire thing. And so I never finished the book because it's unconventional to the point where it's like,
Well, not to mention
Words
how
are hard.
much has language changed since then, you know, like it's like, you know, Shakespeare's a great writer, but nowadays you have to kind of decipher a lot of it because we just don't write and speak that way anymore.
Yeah.
You know, I think that's the big hurdle with that book is, like, not only is it told unconventionally, but it's also told in a language we don't really use anymore.
Right. You know? And I think, like, you make mention, Casey, about the that this is like the definitive, this is the Dracula that everybody knows, at least for modern cinema. Is, you know, this is one of those few movies where Francis Ford Coppola goes and makes this movie, but doesn't put his own name on it like he's done with other movies like The Outsiders and stuff like that. This is one where he puts the, you know, the writer's name on it to make it that definitive version of it, you know, which is making people want to read the book, make people kind of want to see what this is about, kind of thing. I've enjoyed this movie since the day that I've originally watched it, when basically when I was a kid. And still enjoy it to this day. So I'm definitely glad that we're having the opportunity to be able to finally talk about a Dracula movie I had seen prior to you talking about us doing Dracula movies this month.
Well, it's kind of funny. Speaking of Mr. Coppola, we just covered a big chunk of his filmography earlier in the year, and I specifically left this one off because I'm like, I kind of do want to touch on most of his filmography throughout the year, but I'm like, Dracula we can fit somewhere else. And that's kind of where this entire series stemmed off of. I'm like, well, we'll just say we'll cheat and we'll put another Coppola later in the year so we can cover more Coppola during Coppola month. So this is sort of an extension of that month.
You cheated.
We did. That's fine. If we get more Coppola, I will cheat on this podcast anytime just so we can have Mr. Coppola more on it. So that's why I'm glad we
no Dementia 13 episode. I tell you, this is a tragedy.
If you want some Dementia 13, just go watch our movie night that you and I recorded, Sam, where we watched the entire movie together and talked about it.
Watch Dementia 13 with Casey and I talking over it about probably stuff not related to the movie.
No,
and Sam realizing it's not as great as he once thought it was.
No, it's not.
But this Dracula, I was not privy to it very much as a kid. I was telling Brian, I only watched this for the first time like a year and a half ago. Like early 2020 was the first time I had ever seen this.
I was the horror guy. I had never seen this before last year.
I don't know. It was just one of those elusive adaptations, especially with Dracula in it and this cast that I just missed. But as soon as I watched it, I'm like, yeah, this is the best Dracula movie. Like, period. Like, there's no question in my mind. In my mind, personally, this is my favorite Dracula. But we'll get into that. What about you guys, Shelby, Sam? What's your guys' history with at least Coppola's version of this movie?
I mean, here's the thing. This last time that I watched, like when I watched it last week and prepped for this, I was a little shocked to find that a lot of this movie felt brand new for me. So I'm wondering if I know I've seen parts of it. Like parts of it very much stood out. I was like, yes, I remember this. But I don't have any recollection of the erotic Keanu threesome, which is something that I would have remembered as a teenager.
That means that you watched it on television.
I
you probably
at least watched it on television.
You probably watched
the whole thing. I have.
You probably watched like the late night USA version that's still edited for television.
Probably. So, I logged this on Letterboxd as a first time watch because I was like, so much of this was brand new to me. And maybe it was just partially like all the years in between the last time I watched it and now. But yeah, I got it. I like it. I'm a little dracked out from this month. I'm not going to lie. I love horror movies. I love vampires. I've watched the same story told in very different ways, but I've watched the same story unfold 4 times this month, and it's just a little much for me. But yeah,
blame Casey.
It's a great movie. I enjoy this one a lot. So.
I definitely do remember the erotic Keanu scenes quite well. And going back, I remember I watched this movie way too young. And I watched it around the same time that I first watched Interview with the Vampire. because for some reason I liked all of the 90s vampire movies growing up, like, Lost Witch.
Another very erotic. Yes.
Yes. And no, and I think it's interesting though, like kind of that development of the erotic vampire, but that's, the rest of that. But no, I remember I loved this film apart from that. Growing up, I thought it was really interesting. And that's what got me into wanting to actually read the book and, what is vampire lore? What is this? I remember I was really young and I ended up writing. They were like, oh, you can write whatever history paper you want in like 5th grade or whatever. And it's like, I'm going to write the entire history of Greek vampires, like, why not? So, but no, I think it's really interesting. And it's a cool way to try and get people interested in things that they wouldn't typically be interested in. And especially reading a book, that's completely developed from, fictional letters and diary entries and stuff. Like, I mean, that's not usually what somebody would want to read, in the 21st, 20th century. So it's interesting, but no, I love this film. I think it's great.
I'm kind of glad we have this film now that we do, just because how complex that book is written.
Yeah.
Nobody these days is reading that book. They don't have the attention span.
No. Even kids these days would be like, 1992? I don't know if I can watch this movie.
That movie's almost 30 years old.
It's old.
Hotel Transylvania is the new Dracula for this generation.
Thank you, Sandler.
Sandler keeping the Drac name strong.
I mean, he's still into real estate in that movie too, so it still works.
Yeah, that's fair. You see, the Hotel Transylvania movies are smarter than we give them credit for.
I like to think the Hotel Transylvania is canon with this movie here. This is this Dracula in the next life.
His extension.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Complete with I don't know, Andy Samberg's character ending up in the basement of Dracula's castle having a threesome in Hotel Transylvania 5. But
somewhere,
Andy crossover we deserve.
No, I was just thinking at some point, that Sandler went to Sony because I have an idea, and they're like, yeah, no, we cannot do that in a kids movie.
This movie's history is, I find it quite interesting as well, because a movie, Brian, we talked about earlier when we talked about Coppola movies was Godfather 3, which was kind of one of those movies that Coppola himself was looking for. Like, I need to make some money. I'm just going to bank off 2 previous movies that I just did and try to make some more money. Here's another movie that was that for his studio of, I need to make some more money. How can I get out of it? And that's one of the reasons why this movie is where it is. Even so much so the casting of this movie, because that's kind of where I want to start with our cast of this movie. Because as of last week, we talked about the infamous Keanu Reeves in this movie, playing Jonathan Harker and trying his damnedest to have a British accent. And oh my, Keanu, I love you so much, but you're trying, buddy. You are really trying. But
he was really trying.
He was trying, and I give him props for trying. I feel so bad watching him every time because he's trying too hard. But the original casting for this movie, I'm like, why would you not do that with Johnny Depp? And I'm like, that just makes too much sense to not have done it. But apparently the studio's like, yeah, he's not good looking enough. Get the guy from Bill and Ted. I'm like,
and get him really to play essentially British Ted.
Yeah.
I kept hoping and praying for Alex Winter to just pop up once and be like, whoa, dude, vampires. Like, God, I just want that crossover so bad.
Now you make me want to go back to the Bill and Ted cartoon and see if they actually pulled that off.
I bet you there's a Halloween episode in that. We should
right?
check
See?
it out. That'd be funny.
Bill and Ted fight vampires, yeah.
But no, it's funny. You made reference to that before I actually sat down to watch this movie, because you watched, like you said, you watched it about a week ago. I watched it a couple of days after you did, and immediately all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, I'm looking at young Keanu Reeves going, now I can't get this image out of my head of wanting to see Bill and Ted popping up in this here.
The first time he talks in Awestruck Wonder, I'm like, oh my God, he is doing Ted with a bad British accent. Like, that's what this is.
I give the man props in the fact that he knew that, he probably wasn't quite qualified for this, didn't have the accent, and his accent is bad only because he was overly doing it. He's overly trying because he wanted to basically, I mean, like said this to Casey before. It's like, you're presented with the movie to be in a movie like Dracula, and you're in a Coppola movie. If that opportunity is presented to you, and your schedule's wide open, you don't say no. You say, how am I going to make this work? And I give him props for at least trying.
And apparently Coppola has actually admitted as such, as like, yes, he's aware that Keanu's performance was maybe less than the others, but he took such a liking to him that he was like, yeah.
Even Keanu's like, I probably wasn't the best guy for this job either.
I don't really mind Keanu's performance, and that's just because I don't like Jonathan as a character. So I think it's good for me because I'm not sitting here going, Mina, why would you fall for, a horrible vampire? I'm going, you know what? I don't blame her because your other choice is Jonathan. So go for it, girl. Get Dracula.
In this case,
you're
that's
a little throwaway.
Very compelling. It's a very compelling argument for Dracula, actually, when you put it that way.
I guess.
And 92's Gary Oldman wasn't that bad looking at the time either.
No. I've said it before.
Oldman.
Every single one of these live action Draculas that we have talked about can get it. Like, they're good looking men. They're very attractive men.
I was going to say,
Lugosi, I know he was like middle aged at the time he took that. Like, nope. He can still get it. Like,
it's the accent. It's sexy.
Yeah, it is. It legit is. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If the point of this movie is to make you not like Jonathan Harker, I guess that does that of like, I just don't even want to see you on screen. Like, you're trying, but I don't know. That's where I'm like, if Johnny Depp was on here, the sexual
off the castle walls.
Whee!
the chemistry that would have come out between Depp and Winona Ryder would have just been like, yeah, that's obviously the relationship you want because that's an actual real life relationship. And Depp could at least pull off the British accent.
Johnny Depp is kind of a real life sexy vampire. Like
that's what I don't get. Why would you not cast him in this movie?
Yeah, cast him as Dracula. I mean, we kind of got that with Dark Shadows, but they covered him up with really bad makeup.
I also want to point out, because as it has been a while, even though I've owned this movie for a long time, it had been a while since I've sat down and watched this, to see a bunch of familiar faces that I did not either realize were in this movie or I forgot were in this movie. And we're talking about the fact that, that Johnny Depp wasn't the good looking one. That's why we got Keanu Reeves. And yet we have the Princess Bride, we have the Dread Roberts and the Rocketeer in this movie. Mm-hmm. And Keanu Reeves is the one that gets to play Harker.
Honestly,
this is I feel like
if the rest of the ensemble cast wouldn't have been so strong, I don't think we would have noticed. I feel like he was just very overshadowed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, come on. I'm looking at one of the Vampire Brides and realize that Monica Bellucci is in this movie before anybody even know who the hell she was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's doing too much in a role that he didn't need to do a whole lot in. You know what I mean? If he would have just stayed with like his kind of static Keanu, like, most of the time Keanu does not emote much, right? It's when he tries to emote more that you start seeing the seams in his performance.
Mm-hmm.
If he would have just kept it dialed back like he does in just about every successful movie he's in, it would have been fine. No one would have even noticed the accent. It would have literally just blended in. But he tries to go big too many times, and that's when it's like, oh, this is cringy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm gonna go off Shelby's point too, that this cast is so good. This entire cast, because this is a huge ensemble, which you kind of don't always get in a Dracula movie. You usually get Dracula, Jonathan Harker, Van Helsing, and Mina. You get those 4 characters. Those are the core characters. Here you get those, and then you get everybody else too, where you're like, well, yeah, they're all standouts, because you look at this and you see Carrie Elways pop up on screen. I'm like, yeah, let's follow Carrie Elways for a little bit longer, because he's at least interesting and is playing a character you at least want to look at and follow their character for a little while. And this movie has so many of that. And I think, I mean, one of the characters for me that kind of falls back from other adaptations, though, is Renfield. I don't think he's given as much to do in this one. He's not a standout like in 31 Dracula, but he's still pretty integral to the Dracula mythos in this story too.
Yeah, and Tom Waits is like unrecognizable in that role. I thought it was Ron Perlman on the first shot. I think it was the facial hair kind of gave his face that shape, and then I was like, no way, he's too small to be Ron Perlman. And then I looked it up. I'm like, oh my God, that's Tom Waits. Like, no, it was crazy to me.
For me, it was one of those ones where, again, I'm like, I'm recognizing all these faces I hadn't seen for a while, and immediately I was like, that looks like a young Tom Waits, but it can't be Tom Waits, until I did the same thing. I looked it up, because that was the first person I thought of. I was like, wow, he's so underutilized. I mean, you get somebody like Tom Waits to play Renfield, you should have played the shit out of Tom Waits being cast as Renfield.
Yeah, Tom Waits Tom Waits is a great person to take the baton from Dwight Frye and deliver a truly great Renfield performance. He's just sidelined here, you know.
Yeah.
Dwight Frye is the only Renfield that has stood out to me in any Dracula adaptation. But
it makes me kind of wonder how much the final film differed from the original script, because the script wasn't written by Coppola. So I'd be interested to see kind of the differences in that, because I wonder if Renfield was just not written very well, and that they were just working with what they had. I think that would be interesting.
Well, and my question too, kind of going back to the book and everything like that, how much play does Renfield have in the book, to the point where Coppola is trying to squeeze this all in to be more inclusive to what the book was? Again, somebody who's never read it and whatnot, I don't know if his excerpts are 15 pages or 50 pages, that sort of thing.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why Dwight Frye sticks out so much in that 31 Dracula, is because he literally gets Jonathan Harker's role in the first half of the movie. He's the one that gets to go visit Dracula. And like this movie, I think this has the best like interpretation of that, like the dinner scene when Harker finally goes to the house, Dracula's castle, and you have just the shadow work in this movie is insane. What Coppola is doing, all the camera work in this movie is insane. What Coppola is doing, everything just like in camera, shooting everything in camera. And from what I understood was, is it his son that was shooting this with him? That was like, yeah, I can do that. Or one of the Coppolas, not sure which one. Was it Roman? I think so. I'll look it up as we're talking. Was one like, yeah, I can figure it out. We can shoot everything in camera, even though everybody's telling you can't. And that's such a like Coppola thing of, well, if you tell me I can't, well, I'm going to go do it anyway and give you the middle finger with my final film. And he does that. This. Like every shadow work that he has, every camera trick that is in this movie is just insane to watch. Like I would love to go back to 1992 and just watch this and be immersed in it on the big screen.
Well, especially for the fact that Coppola was very standoffish in not wanting to go the computer CGI route, wanted doing everything practically and whatnot. So for like, especially like you said, like the shadow work and whatnot, you know, that's, you know, figuring out how to do it practically, doing it, you know, which you're obviously assuming you got a double on the side that's casting the shadow to make the shadows different than how, you know, Gary Oldman is actually performing and whatnot. So I love the fact that he's like, you know what, I'm going to do this. I mean, I'm going to make it look good, and I'm not going to rely on special effects that the 90s were starting to go, hey, you know what, we can do this a different way.
Well, and it's nice too, because, you know, you really get that nod to like Nosferatu and to the original, you know, these are the real vampires on film, you know, like you see that nod, which is, it's nice that it's not being done CGI or computer or anything else. I mean, it is done all there, real people, real sets, on camera. I mean, it's much more reminiscent of how things would have been done, you know, with Murnau back in the 30s.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did. I just looked it up here quick. The studio gave him a visual effects team. They told him they can't do it. He's like, well, then you're fired. And then he asked Roman Coppola to be like, yeah, let's figure this out. And that's how everything is accomplished in this movie, which I just find just remarkable throughout this movie, of how much work is just thrown into just doing everything in camera. Like even the scene of like Keanu shaving, and you have Dracula behind him. And it's like, oh my God, how did they do that? Especially in camera. It's like, well, you just have Keanu's stunt double stand there and have that as the back of the head. And you have Keanu on the other side of the mirror. Like just simple stuff like that is, simple stuff as we would think after you hear about how they did it. It's like, oh yeah, that makes so much sense. Obviously that's how they did it. But in the movie, it's just so seamless how everything is integrated into this movie, especially like you talk about the original Stoker novel and how it is letters and all these memoirs written, how this movie integrates it into the story of like, it's not necessarily how it's telling the entire story. It's not like having Harker narrate the entire movie, or having the other characters narrate each section that they're in. It's just having those letters written back and forth between Jonathan Harker and Mina. Like that is how you adapt a story that is kind of complex to read, like Dracula, and have that the core of it still seep into like the final Coppola product that comes out on the other end.
Yeah.
Well, and it's neat too with the letters, because it's kind of Blair Witch before Blair Witch, because like the original book is all composed of just clippings and diary entries and letters and everything else. So it's kind of the reader is feeling as if they get to piece that story together. So being able to kind of have that, and there's one thing that the movie leaves out is the fact that there is a sequence in the book where they're like Mina and Jonathan are trying to put together all of these different timelines and everybody else, and what are your entries and what are your entries, what do your letters say, and trying to piece it all together. And it's interesting because like without seeing that in the actual film, we're just seeing that completed version, which I think is interesting. I think it'd be cool to kind of do another version of Dracula if somewhere to down the line, of more of that kind of piecing it together. I think that might be interesting to kind of play with the timelines a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure.
Because that's one thing I think is in a way sort of missing, is the like Van Helsing figuring out who Dracula is. Because it's in this movie, it's more of, oh, there's Dracula, let's go chase him down.
Yeah, well, then it's already happened.
Yeah, Van Helsing knows like immediately the moment he sees the bite marks, he's like, oh, I know exactly what this is. And there is no guessing. The students aren't trying to figure it out. It's just, I know what it is. This is our mission. This is what we're going to do.
Maybe it's just Anthony Hopkins going, I don't want to look dumb on screen. I have to know this. I need to know this. I need to have known this ahead of time.
It's the Fast and Furious, I can't lose a fight clause, but for, smart people.
Is this what Gary Oldman and Anthony Hopkins have in their contracts?
Yeah, they can't look dumb in any movie.
They can't look dumb.
No one can outsmart me in any scene.
Did you watch Gary Oldman in The Fifth Element? He got bested by Bruce Willis.
Yeah, that's probably why he has that clause now, Brian.
It's funny. Vin Diesel's clause is the exact opposite of being the smartest guy in the room. So.
Yeah. I'm just gonna be the biggest and the dumbest.
But what's not dumb is this movie, because I think again, I don't know how I'm trying to transition back into this, but I'm gonna jump back into Anthony Hopkins, because I dig his Van Helsing. I think his Van Helsing is very different than other adaptations of Van Helsing as well, where he is kind of, to me, he's kind of this mix of previous Van Helsings that we've got. Like, I would say he's kind of like the Peter Cushing and blanking on the actor's name from 31 Dracula, kind of mixed.
Edward Sloan?
Yes, mixed together. Like those two mixed together, having the intellect, but like I believe Anthony Hopkins can probably stab someone pretty quickly in the heart with the stake.
Well, yeah, I mean, have you seen Silence of the Lambs? No, yeah, I agree. I think that Hopkins is a really good Van Helsing. Weirdly enough, like I feel like he's not as prominent in this movie as he is in like either the 79 one or the 58 one. Like, I feel like he's more of a side character in this. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I just think that, like, he definitely, like, his Van Helsing gets sidelined for the main love story, which is great because, I mean, Winona and Gary Oldman have a ton of chemistry. They light up the screen whenever they're on it. But yeah, it was kind of funny when you brought it up. I was thinking, and I'm like, God, I don't remember a whole lot of Anthony Hopkins. Like, weird enough, I think, like, he just doesn't shine through as much in this cast.
He's more,
I guess, I don't know.
I can agree with that because he is kind of with Lucy and the three love interests of her more so than he is with Dracula and Mina, which is kind of an interesting take, at least on Van Helsing.
Yeah.
But again, mixes it up for us who are watching Dracula's back to back to back, having this version, especially giving Lucy something to do in this movie.
Yeah. And if I remember right too, in the book, when they hunt them down, like, it's a whole group of them, correct? I haven't read it since I was in, like, high school.
Yeah, in the book, the Dracula is killed. Spoilers, is killed by and I can never remember his name, but
it's one of the
the American
the people who are like Quincy.
I can never remember his name. Yes,
maybe Quincy.
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's correct. But he's the one that originally kills him. So it's interesting because they kind of pushed them to the wayside to give Mina a little bit more time. And it is true in the book, though, with Mina and Van Helsing, like, they are, like, they go off on their own. But, like, that split is a lot longer in the book, too, than in the actual film. So it's interesting to kind of see the way that they kind of put him to the wayside as opposed to making them kind of the ones that end up killing him. But, I mean, the entire love story is completely added to in this version because there was no love story at all. So I think it's just kind of had to be done to be able to add the additional story.
Yeah.
Well, and I'll
say I think this does the love story side of things a lot better than the 79 version. Like, way better than the 79 version. You guys were talking last week about how Frank Langella is a very sympathetic Dracula, and I didn't get that from that movie at all. This one, like, I feel bad for Gary Oldman. That's
where I differ, and it's because of the added element of he's Vlad the Impaler. It's like, why do I feel bad for you? You're kind of
you're kind of an asshole.
Yeah,
even impalers deserve love, Casey.
But he had his chance, and he was busy impaling people, and he should have been paying attention to his wife.
Well, the reason he impaled people is because he went crazy, though. Come on now.
Yeah,
he was in love. He was so in love, he killed people.
Is your heart made of stone, Casey?
Yeah.
Mental note for anybody tells you that they're falling deeply in love, you're like, just stay away from me. I don't need you killing me.
Love makes people crazy, Brian.
I guess so.
Just don't impale anyone for me, please.
I would love to hear
Casey,
somebody.
I've already impaled like 3 people for you this week.
I know. That's what I'm saying. I want to hear that at the police station. I'm supposed to get off, but you killed somebody. I'm in love. Oh, okay. You can leave.
It's like the end. That's why you've never heard of it.
It's like the ending of Interstellar. It's all about love, and it makes sense, and we feel okay about it after. But
you could use a better analogy there, buddy.
I was making a joke because Interstellar's ending is horrible. Anyway,
yes.
This ending's how it deals with love, I think, is much better than Mr. Christopher Nolan's. He at least Coppola understands love. I don't know if Nolan does. I don't know the guy personally, but anyway, I like the love story when Winona gets introduced. When Mina gets introduced, I'm like, okay, there's at least the relationship between the two. I'm like, I buy that. I don't buy that you're a crazy old man who just murdered a bunch of people and hung their bodies outside your castle because you're a crazy person. I don't like you, but if you're with Winona, I'm like, yeah, I like you. All right, I get it. That's where I think, for me, that's where I'm like, that's like how the love story evolves for me. Whereas last week, Frank Langella was just like, he's already sympathetic because he's a cool, nice guy when he shows up to meet everybody. This one, it's like, we don't get that at all in this. We just get the love story. We just get the 2 one-on-one relationships.
I mean, he has disco night fever here, Casey. How can you feel bad for him? Ew.
I like the guy. I want that again.
That's the Dracula I want to party with.
You want to party with Frank?
I want to party and do the have some Saturday Night Fever dances with
Party
Dracula.
with Christopher Lee.
That too. I would definitely party with Chris. Except you would not be getting any disco with Christopher Lee. You're getting some heavy metal Dracula.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly why you don't party with Frank Langella.
Anyway, love story in this movie. What are you guys? What are you guys' thoughts on the love story in this movie?
I love it, but I also have always loved Winona Ryder in everything that she's in. I think she's just one of the most underrated actresses ever. Like, honestly, of all time, I will say that. I went through a huge phase in high school where like it was just Winona movies, like straight up, and that's probably when I watched this.
Did it start with The Crucible?
And I actually did watch The Crucible during that phase, and it's a decent movie. Daniel Day-Lewis is really good in it. Is it Daniel Day-Lewis in that? Right?
You're just over there. You're just over there in Edward Scissorhands land and
and that's the movie that really
land.
Took over with that and Heathers. It was like Edward Scissorhands and Heathers on like constant rotation. And I just in this movie she is luminescent. You totally understand why a centuries-old vampire would wait centuries for her. Like, and you totally get why she falls for the centuries-old vampire, because he is suave. I mean,
especially when he's got the purple sunglasses.
You guys know I love vampires, and the more erotic the vampires, the better. Like, I am just 100% in on all of that, and so like this is probably my favorite Dracula adaptation. And it's simply because like it's a slick love story that just like, I don't know, it tugs at my heartstrings. It's sexy as hell. Like, we're just gonna go there. It is. It's a sexy movie. And I love it. I really, I don't know. The more I think on it, the more I sit on it, the more I'm like, yeah, this movie kind of blew me away, and I underrated it on Letterboxd. But yeah, it's
there. He can fix it for you, Casey.
Oh, please do.
He was making comment earlier that you underrated it on Letterboxd.
He told me before the episode started that he was really surprised and disappointed in my ratings this week.
I will say something that you could basically point to, and Shelby has basically already commented. I'll point that way. There we go. Is the fact that I think that the pivot that we have is that early mid 90s of, in my experience of all these different vampire movies, that eroticism, that sexual tension, all of that stuff basically is like during this time, during the Interview with the Vampire. Otherwise, we didn't quite, it was there, it was present, but it wasn't ever as present as it was from basically the early 90s to current.
And I'd even say it started earlier than that with The Lost Boys in '87, which you all know is like my favorite movie of all time.
Yeah, but it's kind of, it starts kind of steamrolling into that time, but you figure Lost Boys wasn't quite there because they were still, oh no, it was rated R. Never mind. I was about to say PG-13. I'm like, no, that was rated R.
Lost Boys is steamy, man.
They could have gone a little further. I'm just saying. Like this
I
one
love
did.
it whenever.
Like you said, there was a threesome you didn't remember was there.
I think the sexualization of vampires though is really interesting because like so much of it, that even goes, that's like the original work. Dracula is like, it's a sexual experience. The entire process of like drinking the blood and everything else. It's very sexual in nature. And I think it's really neat the way that we've kind of taken that on. And especially like Interview with the Vampire and Dracula and everything else. And the way it's kind of, the way it sexualizes men and women very differently, I think is interesting because of like the way it makes men more like the sophisticated, dapper, I'm a suave, smooth talking man. It's not like and with women, it's much more like just erotic, just pure erotic. So I think it's interesting the way the sexualization has occurred, but I think that's a social thing, but I think it's fascinating.
Yeah, I would agree.
It probably wouldn't happen like that right now. I think they would change it up a little bit.
We saw how that happened. It was called Twilight.
Yeah. Oh, that's something else I think is interesting. Because the way it transgressed into Twilight is fascinating to me.
You lit up when we brought up Twilight.
Why? How does it go
Twilight?
from Gary Oldman? I just want to know how it goes from Gary Oldman to sparkly Robert Pattinson. Where does this transition happen? Because I want to know. I want to talk to somebody about it.
I'm waiting for the transition to happen again, where we just bring back now Robert Pattinson. You're like, yeah, that's my vampire now with like a scruffy beard and he's gross and sweaty.
Like
and
the
like,
Lighthouse, but vampires.
Yes,
I'd watch that.
Yeah,
I don't even know how to respond to that.
You put any phase of Robert Pattinson, yeah, yep. Mm-hmm.
As long as our Pats is biting down on Willem Dafoe's neck in that movie, then I'm in.
Again, I still
Erotic
stand by the fact
Lighthouse
that
vampires.
It was already pretty erotic, guys.
It was already. Yeah. All I remember is leaving that theater and go, "What the hell did Casey have me watch?"
The best movie of 2019.
Tentacle porn, if you ever wanted it.
Mm-hmm. That's so good.
Dracula.
So Dracula. Okay, so speaking of, let's get into like the most sexual character in this movie. Let's get to Lucy, because I think again she is just pushed to the wayside in like every version of this movie, unless you change the names between Mina and Lucy, but they're still playing the character that was originally written. At least in this one, she is given so much to do. She's a vital part, maybe one of the most vital parts of this story, which I love that they're giving Lucy this. Also, it's never like, especially with Mina, it's never like frowned upon, like, oh, like she's exploring her sexuality. She has like 3 different guys going, you know, like wanting to be with her. Mina at first is like, oh no, that's kind of weird, but then she's like, okay, yeah, I get it. Why am I with Jonathan? Let me try to explore this a little bit. And I think that's
she drops that book.
What's that?
And then she drops the book.
Oh,
like, really? What are you looking for?
Mm-hmm. And I think that's like, again, a hidden catalyst for this entire movie happening is Lucy is exploring a lot of things, convincing Mina to do the same. Then when Mr. Dracula comes along looking all sexy in his top hat and mustache, Mina's like, yeah, Jonathan's out of town. Like, he's a boring sack. Let's
Those
go.
Long flowing locks.
Let's go hang out with the dapper man with his cane. Like I love her character in this movie too. Like she has the scariest part of this movie. That's just still as an adult. Like that's a terrifying moment with her completely in white, and then just the contrast of red coming out of her mouth. And I want to get to that in just a minute. But yeah,
I think Lucy is such an underrated character because like. And especially the way that they treat her in this film is really interesting with the addition of the love story, because like she's very feminist and very free and very sexual. But then when Van Helsing comes, it's just she's only a child and you're kind of drawn back. It's like this is a woman who's acting very much beyond her age with no life experience whatsoever. And she's barely 20. You know, it's interesting because you're seeing all of this happen to this very young woman, and then you're having Mina drug into all of it and how she's reacting to all of it. I think it's really interesting because it's like showing kind of Victorian women and how they would interact within this, because Lucy would probably just be diagnosed with hysteria and kind of thrown to the wayside, and no man would have probably looked at her because she was too sexual. But she's put in a very powerful position. So kind of seeing her exploration of sexuality and the addition of, you know, the gore, the horror, and she's so young is really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
I was just going to say the scene with Dracula as the wolf and her is like, I don't know, like that scene alone is like, this shows kind of what, in a way, this movie is really trying to tell its story. Just through that one scene, because it is very terrifying, but it's also very like sexual, primal in that one scene of literally showing Dracula as this monstrous beast, and then this woman just in lust with this thing you can't even comprehend what it is, you know. That scene alone is fascinating,
and it's like a little bit of a commentary on like the idea of temptation. because, you know, Lucy is like tempting Mina to go, oh, you know, go explore, be sexual. And then when Lucy is sexual, it's, you know, it's graphic and vicious and horrible. And it's like, should you, as a Victorian woman who has your, you know, your standards of the day, should you be going out and exploring that sexuality? Or will you be devoured by a wolf-like creature? So I think it's an interesting commentary, and I feel like somebody could write a paper on it, and it would be really interesting to read.
Yeah.
I think, you know,
So much so it took Brian's breath away.
Oh my gosh.
He's still thinking.
Brian, your microphone is cutting in and out. But with that scene of like, I want to jump to another scene with Lucy. Is the one scene I talked about where I think it's one of, if not the most terrifying scenes of this movie, is after Lucy dies. Is the scene where Van Helsing's like, well, we have to go drive a stake through her heart and cut off her head, because in this movie it's not enough to just drive a stake through someone's heart, you have to chop off their head too, which is very graphic and violent. But just the look of her, for me, as like one of the most terrifying images to me growing up was the image of nuns, and this has kind of this nun-like quality to her. And then the scene that's shot in reverse of her going back into the coffin after, I'm like, yeah, no, that's like nightmare fuel of that scene. For me, that's the scariest scene of this movie for me.
Yeah, the catacomb scene where they find her and they stake her. It's incredible. It's incredible vampire design. That, like you said, the shot of her coming up and going back to the coffin. Like the way they shoot that, it's so like unnatural looking that it just automatically sets you off, and it just leaves you uncomfortable for the entire rest of that scene. I also love that she vomits blood all over them. Like, I don't know, that was just such a gross, cool effect that I was just like, hell yeah! Like, I'm an easily pleased person. You blood spatter people in your vampire movie, like that's a thumbs up from Sam. Like,
you just need more blood.
Yeah, I like, you know what, this movie, that's one thing, like this movie has tons of blood, whereas like the other ones were kind of like bloodless and not as graphic. Like, I loved that this was a more visceral Dracula than what we had seen before, you know, because like, I mean, I love Christopher Lee's Dracula because he's so animalistic, he's so like, you know, I mean, he's terrifying, but he's doing most of the talking there. There's no real like gore to speak of, at least in like the horror of Dracula. There's more in like later Hammer installments, but it was great to see this one really, like, I mean, literally go for the jugular on multiple occasions. And so, I don't know, like, to me, blood is such an important part of any vampire movie, like, obviously. And to me, like, it delivered on that. The scene, especially of him, like, in the beginning, stabbing the sword into the crucifix and the blood just raining down from the walls, I'm just like, I'm gonna dig this movie. Like, I just knew it right there. I was like, yeah, this movie is gonna be awesome.
And what's funny is that was Kayla's exact response, because she had never seen this before too. And as soon as it stabs into the cross and the blood starts dripping out, she's like, all right, I'm hooked. Like, I'm into this movie. It had Keanu, but I'm more hooked. I
remembered that scene. I remembered that scene from when I had watched it, like, way back in the day. Like, as soon as he stabs the cross, I'm like, oh, it's this one, you know, like, yeah. And then a bunch of stuff happened that I don't remember. I don't remember Keanu from this movie at all. Like, all of Keanu was like almost brand new for me. So maybe I just watched some like fan edit on like late night PBS that was like, we're just cutting Keanu out of this.
Where's all your YouTube videos?
Yeah.
But it's also one of those kind of things that, I mean, when you think of vampires, you think the blood is synonymous for it, to the point where you want to basically be an extension, either its own character or an extension of character, you know, to the fact that, like you said, I mean, this is when we finally get a lot of the blood, but, you know, but that's the things that we're looking for, because again, you know, when we think of vampires, you know, whether even be a little bit or a lot of it, you know, you expect to see at least some of it, and at least the fact that we get a good use of it in this movie.
Yeah. The second best Dracula movie for blood loss is hands down Dracula Dead and Loving It. I love this movie. I have to bring it up on every episode this month because the staking scene in Dracula Dead and Loving It has the most blood I've ever seen in a vampire movie before, and I love it.
That doesn't sound like anything that Mel Brooks would do at all. Just up the ante.
Okay, so these two haven't seen it. Shelby, you've seen this, right?
I love it. I love that film so much. I think it's great. Yeah. Honestly, it's one of my favorite pieces of satire ever. I think it's just so clever. It's so clever.
It is. I love it. I love everything with the like they're chasing Lucy. And she tries to seduce Homewood, and Homewood's like, "But I'm British," and it's just the whole thing is so ridiculous, and I love it.
It's so smart.
Yeah,
it's so smart. But it's so stupid, but it's so smart, and I recommend it to anybody who likes Dracula because it's so clever.
Yes. Thank you. Oh my god.
When you were approached for this episode, you should have said to Casey, you know, I'll do Stoker's Dracula, but I'd rather do Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Honestly, it was funny because when you guys approached me, it was like, oh, man, I'm going to have to watch Dead and Loving It now too. Because like I got to get it back in my head. That's a yearly though for me. Every October I got to watch it.
Oh
yeah. You sound like You sound like you felt like you were really like arm twisting, going, oh man, now I got to watch Dead and Loving It again.
Shoot.
I literally have my VHS right here.
It's
VHS,
so good,
the way God intended.
All right. I will make a promise. We will do Mel Brooks some point next year. We will bring Shelby back and we will do Dracula Dead and Loving It.
Good, because I will finally get a chance to watch that movie.
We will make it happen.
You guys, it is such an underrated Mel Brooks movie.
It is.
I mean, it really is.
Yes.
Having just watched Young Frankenstein at the State, I'm like in a Mel Brooks mood where I'm like, yeah, I'll probably watch that before this month ends. I'm watching Dracula Dead.
History of the World Part 2 is coming out on HBO. So
I never thought that would ever happen. I never thought that would ever happen.
What are the over, like, what's the over under on whether Brooks actually does a Hitler on Ice segment for it?
I'm really hoping they just pick it straight up from where it left off.
Right? Yeah, they have to.
Roll with it.
They have to. Oh my God. We have to have Shelby on more.
We'll cover that movie too because I've never seen it.
I've seen it so many times. Have me come on. I've got a degree in history. Come on now. I've got this.
Yes.
So whenever we talk about anything that has any sort of historical value in film, we just bring Shelby on as the secondary commentator. Because I'll admit I haven't seen History of the World Part 1 either.
I watched History of the World Part 1 for the first time in the basement of my childhood church. At about age 12.
As God intended.
As God intended. Oh my gosh. Yep. I remember that very vividly going like, I don't know if we should be watching this here.
So Dracula, 1992. I'm going to jump into, let's get into our final thoughts and then we'll get to our last question here. I'm going to just pick one of you. I'm going to throw it to Mr. Dracula Dead and Loving It fan, Sam, to give us his final thoughts and new rating that he will put on Letterboxd tonight.
New rating. I will change it on Letterboxd tonight.
For Dracula 1992.
So... yes, I will admit that when I watched this, I was feeling Dracula fatigued. I was feeling Drac-teagued. Nope, that didn't work. Can we just edit that part out of this episode?
Nope.
It's immortalized. No, I did. I felt a little fatigued on the story, but and I only rated it 3.5 when I finished it, which is pretty much what I gave all of them except for the 79 Dracula, which I gave a generous 2 stars. It's not good, Casey. I'm sorry.
That movie's a 3.5.
Whatever.
Let him finish his sentence, Casey.
Yeah, let me finish my final thoughts, Casey. I love this movie. Dracula, like, Gary Oldman's Dracula is he's incredible. He's not as iconic as Lugosi. I think Christopher Lee is probably my favorite Dracula, but Oldman really gives him a run for the money. Like he stands toe to toe with those guys, even as iconic and you know, like legendary as they are. This is an adaptation that still stands out. Like I said, I love the blood. I love the eroticism. Just everything about this movie is gorgeous. The score is incredible. We didn't even talk about that, but I love the score of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's so grandiose and epic, and you know, just everything that you would think when like thinking of a vampire epic. This movie has it in spades, and so I absolutely love this. I'm gonna bump it up to a 4, and it might have, with rewatches, a chance to get up to that 4.5, 5 level. I don't know. I'm trying to give out less 5 stars because I'm that guy. I'm like that guy that I'm like, it's either 5 stars or it's 3. Like I don't tend to give anything lower than a 3 a lot because, you know, making a movie is hard and no one wants to make a bad one. But like, I also can't just keep giving out 5s willy-nilly. So it's a 4 out of 5 for me. But I love this movie.
Oh dear, what am I going to do with you? I'm going to sit here and gonna say, you know, this is probably for me, you know, again, based on when it came out, when I was introduced to this movie, for me, Gary Oldman is one of the definitive Draculas, just because he's essentially my introduction into, you know, the Draculas and everything like that. You know, I'm sorry, as a teenager, I wasn't watching Bela Lugosi or Christopher Lee's, you know, Dracula
You're
movies.
missing out.
Well, things were a little different in my day, Samuel. So, but you know, it's a, you know, other than the clearly the really hard trying Keanu Reeves, it's a very well stacked cast and enjoyable movie, and hands down, it's good. I would encourage anybody to watch this movie.
Yeah, I love this film. It's my favorite adaptation of Dracula. I think it's very clever. I like the reworks. I would probably give it 4.5 just because it's Keanu's performance. I think it could have been a little bit stronger, even though I don't like Jonathan all that much. But and I think there could have been a bit more Renfield. But I think, I mean, really where this stands out is the ensemble cast, and the production design is just absolutely incredible. Mm-hmm. And I love the amount of research that went into it for that as well, because, you know, I love the nods to Murnau and the classic Dracula and the classic vampire structure. I think it's very smart. And yeah, no, I think it's a great Dracula film, and I think it's a great vampire movie. So I think it works well on both cases.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm right there too. I gave it a 4.5. I think this is my favorite version of Dracula. This is my favorite version of this story. Gary Oldman might not be my favorite Dracula, but he's in the best Dracula movie overall. Again, we can throw shade at Keanu's performance. He's trying, and I applaud him for trying. For me, like the half is like, again, the beginning of like, why am I supposed to like this Dracula? And then that progresses as the movie gets forward, which is good. And it's obviously the chemistry between pretty much everybody in this movie is just off the charts. Even the scene where we briefly touched on Anthony Hopkins and Winona Ryder getting Van Helsing and Mina together. It's like, that is such a great chemistry between those two too, and it's just a very brief part of this movie. And yeah, I think the entire ensemble, the production design, the score, like Sam said, is incredible for this movie. This is one of these movies that once it goes on the state theater screen, I'm there because I need to see this movie on the big screen.
For sure.
But last question, then we always get to here. If you're gonna pair Bram Stoker's Dracula from 1992 with another movie for a double feature, you're going to feature this movie and blank. I can see Shelby thinking. I can see Brian thinking. Sam, you look pretty confident.
I've had one since I watched this.
Okay, I want to start with you then, Sam.
Okay. I'm going to pair this with another 90s horror movie that I absolutely love, that has also adapted from a great piece of literature. I'm going to pair this with Tim Burton's Sleepy Hollow. I absolutely adore that movie. Talk about my Winona phase. I also had a Christina Ricci phase. Like
who didn't?
I was just like, she's like incredible in everything. Like she's still my Wednesday Addams. She's still my Wednesday Addams. And so Sleepy Hollow to me is one of my favorite. Like it's like maybe top 3 Burton for me. I just absolutely love that movie. It's not a faithful adaptation at all. I love the story. It doesn't do the story at all, but it's got a witch controlling a headless horseman that's chopping people up with like battle axes. And I'm like, yeah, that's like right up my alley. That's so up my alley. It's not even like, it's like, did Tim Burton make this movie specifically for me, or is he just like messing with me now? Because so that's me gushing about Sleepy Hollow. But both of them are like these grandiose, like epic, I don't know, just from like 2 great directors. I don't care what you say. Tim Burton, he's lost a lot of his touch, but he at least at one point was a genuinely great director. And I think those movies would complement each other perfectly.
Tell me any headless horseman that isn't good would outdo Christopher Walken.
Yeah. Christopher Walken's awesome in that movie. He's like sharpened teeth. Like, oh God, he's so crazy.
He's the best. He's the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the scene where the witch is literally like seducing that guy, and then all of a sudden you just like, and you're just like, oh no, don't, oh God, you got his blood, you got your blood all over him. Like what? So good. I love that movie. It's so gross. The tree with like all the like bloody parts that like it like opens up, and like the sound design is just like, it's so nasty. I love it.
Oh, Sam.
It's just
2 Sleepy Hollow double features this month. That's cool.
Oh my God, who did the other Sleepy Hollow double feature? It wasn't me, was it?
Oh yeah, Christopher Lee's Dracula.
Yeah, that's right.
You guys got a thing for Sleepy Hollow,
myself, am I?
You probably could have, and I wouldn't have even remembered.
When we do Burton month, Sleepy Hollow is going to be one of them.
Heck yeah!
I mean Burton months.
Yeah, Burton year.
We don't have enough of those. But that's just so you can get the Shadows movie.
Dark Shadows.
Dark Shadows.
Love Dark Shadows. Don't care what anybody says. I dig that movie a lot.
It's fun.
It is.
It's so much fun.
So, I was a little bit on the fence. I have one of 2 ways of going with this for a double feature here. The first thing I thought was I'm going to have a little bit of fun with it because of I like Gary Oldman as a villain. As much as I love him as Sirius Black, that's too easy. Is the first thing I immediately thought of was The Fifth Element, to go from somebody as serious as Count Dracula going into the weird, quirky, weird version of a villain that he was in that. But I thought about that, and I also thought about like the one I would want to, because he gets very dark, is Leon the Professional. Yeah. Because to have a nice dark Gary Oldman double feature, I think would be great.
I'd be so depressed.
You just literally listed like so many Gary Oldman movies, and I'm like, let's just make it like a quadruple feature. That sounds awesome.
Right?
We'll just camp out all day and watch Gary Oldman movies in our PJs.
Yeah. We will have a Gary Oldman. We're just going to start checking off the boxes. Tim Burton month, Gary Oldman month, Ron Perlman month, Tom Waits month.
Winona month. We need a
Winona month.
Yes.
Christina Ricci month. And you know what? While we're at it, let's just throw Rachel McAdams in there too, because I had another phase with that. You know.
Hey, if we're getting Sleepy Hollow, I want a Casper Van Dien month for very bad movies that nobody watches.
Also, at the end of our Rachel McAdams month, we'll do The Notebook, which segs perfectly into Ryan Gosling month, because we can't talk enough about that guy. Seriously.
Our entire year is planned.
Shelby's like, I'm never coming back to this.
What is happening?
I don't know.
As long as I'm on the Mel Brooks month, I'm all good.
Anyway,
we're just going through the 5 shades of bacon or whatever it is, but with me just and my ADD brain just rattling off random people.
Shelby, what's
I
your
have
double
healthy
feature?
fixation with this person, this person.
All right, Sam, calm down. Stop squirreling.
I think I would probably go more the Bram Stoker way, and I would pair it up with something more Edgar Allan Poe-esque. I would either do The Raven or go back and do an old Vincent Price. I think that would be good, like a Mask of the Red Death or something similar. I think would be fun.
Yes. You're talking like The Raven with John Cusack, right?
Yes.
God, that movie's so underrated.
It's so good and so underrated. Yeah. I think it's fantastic. And it's such a good depiction of Poe's life. I love it.
Yeah. I was just going to say, not enough people talk about that movie.
No.
Yeah. I've never seen it. Now I'm curious.
So good. It's so good.
The Raven flew.
Edgar Allan Poe month. We're doing it.
You have to let me on that one then. Okay. Mel Brooks and Poe month. I'm here.
All right.
Yes.
I'm going to keep us going off the rails here. My double feature, I'm going to pair two movies with characters that had boobs on their heads. I'm going to have 1992 Dracula paired with Little Nicky, obviously, because we have to have both Gary Oldman and Kevin Nealon have boobs on their heads. It's a boobs on their head double feature.
Casey, this is why we cannot have nice things.
You're supposed to be the responsible one out of the three of us.
Sam is literally crying.
Oh God!
Who would not attend this double feature? I'm telling you, if the state wants to book Dracula 1992, you do Little Nicky right after it, and you sell the 2-for-1 tickets. You get 2 boobs for the price of 1.
Because nobody's going to go see Little Nicky on purpose.
Technically 4 boobs for the price of 1 because you get Nealon and Oldman with boobs on their heads.
Are you talking about his wig?
Yes.
Oh, that's what it is?
I'm sorry, Shelby. I will apologize for Casey.
Where am I?
That's what it looks like, guys. That's obviously what Kevin Nealon was parodying. Anyway.
You have a complex, Casey.
Did I win?
No.
Serious
problem. I think you lost. I think you lost.
So let us know in the comments your pick for a double feature. You can't use Little Nicky because I just did. But let us know yours in the comments section below. But yeah, anyway, I'm gonna try to be the responsible one and finish this show off. First of all, let's get to some of the plugs. Sam is just dying over there, but
I'm trying not to.
You can subscribe to this show on Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, Amazon Music, and on YouTube. No one's going to subscribe to us after that comment I made, I guess. But if they do, Brian, where can they find us on social media if they want to yell at me?
Please yell at him. Put him back in his place. Please go to Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd HQ and tell Casey he needs to knock it off. And on Facebook, we also have the South Dakota Film Community Group. Film enthusiasts, film lovers, filmmakers like Shelby. On the South Dakota Film Community Group, we'd like to just join the conversation. We like to talk about movies and what's going on.
Before you get to your plug, Sam, I'm going to be responsible again. Join us tomorrow as this episode drops on Thursday for the next film community group meetup. We are having it on a Thursday night, so just throwing that out there. Check it out on Facebook.
Yeah, and if you like this and you want more, you can subscribe to us on Patreon for $5 a month. You get 4 extra very uncensored episodes. If you think we say dumb shit here, wait until you subscribe to us on Patreon. Most of
now
those
that's the sales pitch.
We do a lot of new movies and cult films. This month we have done episodes on Venom, Let There Be Carnage, which I keep forgetting we did. No Time to Die, the new Bond movie. We did Halloween Kills, and this week we will be dropping an episode on Dune, which I'm very excited to finally watch. So listen to us say really weird stuff about Dune later this week by subscribing to us on Patreon. We have a good time there. So yeah.
Shelby, do you have anywhere for people to follow you or anything you do online?
Not really. We do have my crew and I, we have bitterhipsterfilms.com. So you can follow us on there and see what we're up to. But yeah.
Said veryhipsterfilms.com.
Bitter hipster.
Bitter.
Oh, bitter hipster.
Bitter.
Okay, gotcha. Nice. I love
Get it right, Sam.
Come on,
That's
Sam.
why I asked, because I wanted to make sure I got it right.
They are much more classified and dignified than we are in here. Apparently, I can't make these jokes on the show anymore. It's just
You're
not going to happen.
inappropriate, Casey.
I'm going to be even more inappropriate next week, as we're going to be kicking off Ivan Reitman month next month. We're going to be talking Ghostbusters next week. So we're kicking off. We're doing a little Ivan Reitman because his kid has a movie. He's a filmmaker too. So he has the new Ghostbusters coming out. So we're going to have an entire series dedicated to his father, Ivan Reitman. We're going to be talking some Ghostbusters, Stripes, Draft Day, which is kind of a wild card pick that we have in there. And then a Schwarzenegger comedy of his. And I'm probably going to call it here pretty soon because, Sam, you're going to be winning this one. Kindergarten Cop is looking like it will be the Schwarzenegger Ivan Reitman comedy that we will be covering.
Everybody, go on socials, vote for the Kindergarten Cop, because it is literally, like, speaking of Francis Ford Coppola, it's the godfather of children's cinema. So I can't wait to talk about it. Everybody vote for Kindergarten Cop. I can't believe that's even one that we're voting on. That should just be a lock.
Yeah, I thought we brought Shelby on to give us some class, and you clearly are, yeah.
Where's all this love for Junior? I mean, it's by far the superior Schwarzenegger comedy.
That is the one that I hope never wins a poll that I have to talk about.
Sam, we got to end that. We got to end this. This is going on far too long. Shelby, thank you for being on the show. We hope that you will please come back for Mel Brooks and or Edgar Allan Poe month.
Definitely, for sure.
All right. So for Sam Lenz, Brian Mensing, I am Casey Calderon. We'll see you next week on the backlot of South Dakota. Bye-bye.
Bye.